Okay. Yeah. All set? Okay. Ladies and gentlemen, good evening and welcome to Town Hall here in Montclair. I'm Gray Russell. I'm the Sustainability Officer for the Township. I work in the office of the Department of Health and Human Services, and I run the Office of Environmental Affairs. And we're very excited about the really what we call the Community Choice Aggregation Program that we've arranged for the Township of Montclair. And we want to be able to answer all of your questions tonight. If you are confused or concerned or really pleased, we want to make sure you understand exactly what it means and how simple it is and the benefits that will accrue to you and to all residents in Montclair. And we have with us the consulting firm that was acquired by the Sustainable Essex Alliance to help us run the program and organize it, and then basically also to write the request for proposals that we then sent out to suppliers to see if we could get bids that came in with enhanced renewable energy at a lower cost for Montclair residents, and actually for all 5 towns of the Sustainable Essex Alliance, which include our neighbors Verona and Glen Ridge, and also Maplewood and South Orange. With Montclair, those are the 5 towns of the Sustainable Essex Alliance. So the consulting firm is Gable Associates. They're really one of the premier energy and electricity consulting firms in the state, and one of their principals is with us. 2 of their professionals are with us here tonight, and they're going to give you a little presentation which should answer all your questions, but then they're going to be able to also answer any other questions that you have tonight. Okay, so I present to you first Mr. Bob Chilton from Gable Associates.
Thank you, Gray. Good evening, everyone. Thanks for coming out. Nice to see everyone here. My purpose primarily is to provide to you about a 15-minute presentation to sort of give an overview of the program. When we go through this, we're hitting a lot of the topics that over the years on these programs we've received questions on. So hopefully my presentation will hit many of the questions that you have, and it's all. We're also going to put this, or the township's going to put this PowerPoint up on the website. So don't feel riveted to have to scribble down everything on here. It'll be up on the website, and we also have up on the website a more expansive version of the frequently asked questions that were in the package. We can only fit so much in a mailer, so there's a more expansive version of that on the township's website as well. So let me just kind of go through this and describe what the program's about, and hopefully address some of the things percolating around your head, and then whatever I missed or whatever didn't fully satisfy your questions, then obviously we're going to open it up to questions afterward. So this entire program is done under something called a government energy aggregation law, and accompanying rules that have been adopted by the New Jersey Board of Public Utilities. The basic concept is to allow a municipality, or in this case a group of municipalities, to pool all the residents together to go out to the market, creating purchasing power that would not exist if you were an individual, for the purpose, as Gray mentioned, to hopefully get a better price and with more favorable terms and conditions, be that consumer protections provisions or renewable energy content, more favorable than what you could get on your own, and hopefully even better than what PSEG is currently providing. Just for maybe a little bit of background, it's not on this slide. Hopefully everyone's aware, almost 20 years ago now, the electricity industry in New Jersey and the natural gas industry, for that matter, were changed to basically deregulate the marketplace, where back in the day, PSEG and the other electric utilities in the state provided what we call fully bundled service. They owned the power plants, they generated the power, they provided all the delivery services, they provided everything from soup to nuts. When the industry was restructured almost 20 years ago, the utilities were required to divest of their generating assets. They became strictly distribution companies. Their responsibility is the delivery, and the power supply market, the actual production of the energy that goes into the wires, is competitive. And so you can buy your electricity supply from anyone you want, any licensed supplier you want. PSEG still delivers the power. Or if you don't proactively select a third-party supplier, PSEG has power supply, but they source it from the market as well. They're not producing it themselves. They are buying it from the marketplace just like any other third-party supplier. So that's basically the structure of the industry. So again, this program is designed to give another option to folks other than just getting it from PSEG or going out on your own for a third-party supplier, which some of you may have tried in the past. This is another way where the municipality can put all the folks in town together to create purchasing power and hopefully get a better deal. So it starts under the law. The first step in the process for any town is to pass an ordinance to form an energy aggregation program. The ordinance in Montclair was passed in June of last year. Subsequently, the township also passed a resolution to join the Sustainable Essex Alliance. As Gray mentioned, that's including a group including Maplewood, Glen Ridge, South Orange, and Verona. It also includes Millburn. However, Millburn is in JCP&L territory, so they were in a separate group. And in fact, the bids for Millburn, which is in JCP&L, did not produce similar benefits, so there was no contract awarded. So when we talk now about this, the SEA, Sustainable Essex Alliance, we mainly talk about the 5 towns in PSEG territory. So under the rules, the state rules, the municipalities must conduct a competitive bid process. And that starts with those bid documents, the actual documents that are going to go out, you're going to go out to bid with, the contract terms. Those are all first submitted to the Board of Public Utilities and the Division of Rate Counsel State Agency, which is the Consumer Protection Agency, for their review to make sure that everything is consistent with the rules. So this is all done under very strict rules. We provide all the bid documents to the state. They make sure they're in compliance, and then we go out to bid. And in fact, we went out to bid in March is when we finally issued the bid, after the state had reviewed the documents. The competing proposals came in early April, on April 2nd. There were multiple offers made. The most beneficial overall product and offering was from Direct Energy Services, or Direct Energy, for a 17-month contract starting in July, with a renewable energy content of a little over 40%. That was the combination that provided the best overall value. So the 41%, it's 41% renewable energy content. It's essentially 20% or roughly twice the renewable energy content that is the state required amount that is in PSE&G's power supply or most other third-party suppliers. So it's about double the renewable energy content. The breakdown of that renewable energy, it's about 5% from in-state solar producers, and about the other 36% is from regional renewable, we call them renewable energy certificates. Those are primarily from wind projects in this region of the country. New Jersey is part of a regional power grid called PJM, and these wind projects are all located within the regional power grid in the Mid-Atlantic region, a little bit into the Midwest, and a little bit down into the south as far as North Carolina. But it's essentially a Mid-Atlantic power grid. So the contract price is just a shade over 11 cents per kilowatt hour. That is I just say roughly 10% below the average PSE&G tariff price for power supply at the time we awarded the contract. It's actually quite a bit more than 10%. The PSEG rate at the time we did the award was around 13 cents per kilowatt hour. It's now come down a little bit. It's now in the mid 12s, but it's more than 10% below the current tariff rate. And then we do expect later this year the PSEG tariff rate will come down a little bit more. But even with that further reduction, and there are monthly fluctuations in the PSEG rate, even with that considered, and even though we have twice the renewable energy content, which is typically more expensive, we're still expecting over the life of the contract that the average resident would see about $150 of savings over the full 17 months. So it really is a win-win. Much higher renewable energy content and a pretty significant dollar savings. So what are the benefits of a program like this? As I mentioned, obviously the big one is the aggregate purchasing power we get by putting all the folks together and being able to go out and get substantially higher renewable energy content at a lower price. Again, just to reiterate, the renewable content is about double what PSEG has in their power supply. Consumer protections, this is a big element of this. So, and this comes into play particularly for folks who may have in the past ventured out into the third-party supply world and had experiences. So the township has the ability to dictate the terms of the price. So basically the bid specifications include all the terms and conditions of the contract that the supplier has to meet, and contain all the consumer protections that the township would want. And again, as I mentioned, those contract terms are all reviewed by the state. So the price is established and known for the full length of the contract. There can't be any bait and switch. There can't be a market-based rate. There can't be any hidden fees. This is a pretty common theme for many folks that have tried third-party supply on their own, where they have entered into a contract and the initial price is quite attractive and people are very excited. And then one day they notice the price just jumped up through the roof to a market-based price, and that, as I call it, market-based, which market can be however they define it. That happens quite frequently. You may have a 3-month or 6-month or 9-month period where the rate is seemingly attractive, and then overnight it just jumps up really high. And then if you try to get out of the contract at that point, if you notice it, some people don't even notice that happened for a few months, and the supplier's kind of raking it in. Even if you want to get out at that time, not all the time, but there's many contracts where they will have a termination fee. So then if you want to get out of the contract, you're assessed with a fee of $50, $75, whatever it is. And typical third-party supply contract, once the initial term comes to an end, it just automatically rolls over and continues until you do something proactively to get out of it. Whereas in this case with this program, it is a 17-month contract, and that is it. The supplier cannot roll over the contract. They cannot continue it. At the end of the 17 months, one of two things happens. Either the township and the other towns in the alliance decide to do this again, go back out to bid, and start the whole process over. Or if they decide not to go ahead with a second round, or if they do, but the market's changed and they can't get any beneficial offers, everyone just rolls back to PSEG at the end of the 17 months, back to where you started from and where you would have been if you never left. Automatically it happens. There's nothing you need to do. So all of those sort of potential pitfalls that some of you may have experienced with other third-party supply contracts, they are non-existent here. All those protections are in there. And most importantly, the program is an opt-out program where everyone is included initially, with a couple of exceptions which I'll mention. But everyone individually has the right to opt out if it's not something they want to do. And there cannot be, the supplier is prohibited from charging any fees for you to opt out, either at the beginning, middle, end, whenever you want to opt out. So transparency is another big one. Again, everything is out there. There's no fine print for you. What we're laying out is the entire essence of the deal. And again, the deal is between the township and the supplier. You are not a party to any contract. You just have a supplier who's obligated to the township to provide the services that are in that contract. Again, you can opt out anytime you want. At the very beginning, that currently we're in the initial 30-day opt-out period, so you can get out now or up till May 30th, or anytime thereafter after the program actually starts. This is an important point. Your relationship with PSEG does not change. PSEG still reads your meter, still renders your bill. I'll show in a later slide. There's just one change on a line item in your bill. Everything else stays the same. And I always explain this. What some folks don't realize is that essentially when you don't have a third-party supplier and you're with PSEG, essentially you have opt-out rights from that, right? The default is you are going to get power supply from PSEG under supply that has been procured by the utility under state rules. Similar to this, the state tells PSEG when to go to market, how long the contracts have to be, and so basically PSEG is just buying power from the market when and how the state tells them to, and that's the price you get. And if you want to do something else, you essentially opt out of the utility supply into another third-party supply. So this is really just on a more local level a similar model where the municipality is going to market on your behalf, and you are included by default, but you can opt out and go back to PSEG. Go ahead, Jess. So this is not a new concept. The law has actually been in effect for almost 20 years, but the first 12 or 13 years or so, really not much happened. The market just really wasn't conducive. In 2012, that started to change. So since 2012, there have been a large number, over 50 towns in the state that have done this type of program. And I will tell you that almost every town we've worked with over the years that has done this program has, at the end, decided to do it again. So some towns are a little bit skittish the first time through because it is something new. But almost without exception, the towns we've worked with, after they've gone through the first round, they've decided, yeah, we want to do this again. It worked out well. The new wrinkle here is the renewable energy content. That really is a relatively new concept. This is one of the first programs in the state. There's been a little bit of a wave of programs earlier this year starting to have renewable energy content. So this is one of the leaders in the state, and certainly this is the largest program in the state with renewable energy at this point, with the 5 towns put together. Okay, so who is Direct Energy? They're licensed by the state of New Jersey. They've been in business for nearly 20 years, and they've been licensed in New Jersey for about 16 years, I believe. They are one of the North America's largest energy suppliers. They have over 4 million customers in total, including more than 1 million residential customers, and they have thousands of customers in New Jersey. And that's through all different means, direct marketing, all different ways. With regard specifically to this type of a program, they have served large energy aggregation programs for municipalities for many years in Massachusetts, Illinois, and Ohio. They currently serve about 130,000 customers, residential customers up in Massachusetts, and they have gotten into the market here in a big way in energy aggregation just over in this year. And they've been awarded contracts to serve these 5 towns as well as 3 other municipalities in the state just in the last 2 months. They're a big player in the market. They've been around a long time. So in the packet, the mailing packet that you received, there's different forms of communication in which you can contact Direct Energy. There's a toll-free number. There's an email address that's dedicated to this program. And there's also a website you can go to if you want to opt out through that way. And also in the package, there was an opt-out card you can just sign and put back into the envelope provided to opt out. So there are many ways in which you can opt out. Who is Gable Associates? Gray covered this to some extent already. We're an independent energy consulting firm. We're registered with the state of New Jersey. We've been in business in the state for over 25 years. We are not affiliated with any supplier. We do not work for a supplier. We are not a supplier. We are hired by towns to work on their behalf to help them go to market to get the best deal from the marketplace. So we're an agent working on behalf of in this case, Montclair and the other Sustainable Essex towns. Again, we have several ways that we can be contacted. Part of our role as the consultant to the township is to be available to service customers, so folks can call us. We have a toll-free number that's dedicated to energy aggregation programs. We have a website also dedicated to energy aggregation, and we have an email address, which is basically our help desk for this program, where folks can email us, and then we will get back to them with an answer to their questions. So again, if folks want to opt out, they can also opt out through us, through the means provided. And all this information is in the mailing package. So how does it work? So basically, once the contract was awarded, the next step was on May 1st, Direct Energy sent out a mailer. That mailer had several pieces in it that were all reviewed by us and by the township for its content. It included a one-page summary letter. That's on the left-hand side. Obviously, it's too small to read, but these are just images of what you saw. There was a one-page program summary. That's a matrix, a one-page matrix with the basic facts about the program and the contract. And then there was a one-page frequently asked questions. As I mentioned, there's also a longer version of that frequently asked questions on the township's website. And it also included an opt-out card you could sign and a reply envelope that was postage paid. So if you wanted to opt out, didn't want to be in the program, you could just sign that, stick it in the envelope. It goes back to Direct Energy and you're out. Okay, so an overview. If you do decide to opt out, the whole point here is to make it as easy as possible for you to say, hey, listen, I don't want to be in the program. I want to opt out and just stay with PSEG. Again, sign and return the card provided. Call Direct Energy's toll-free number. Email Direct Energy's program email site. You can go through a Gable Associates website or our email address. So we're trying to make it as easy as possible for those folks. So by rules, the initial opt-out period is 30 days. So that began on May 1st. It ends on May 30th. After May 30th, Direct Energy will start enrolling those folks in the program who did not opt out. So anyone who didn't opt out, the next step will be an enrollment. Direct Energy will contact PSEG electronically and say, hey, this customer or group of customers is in the program. That will generate a second letter from PSEG, which I'll talk about. So after the enrollment, if you're still in the program, the service would begin with your July meter read date. And so the new charges for this program for Direct Energy, replacing the old PSEG charges, they would show up in your August bill. Okay, so if you don't opt out by May 30th, you'll be enrolled. That will generate a separate letter from PSEG, which will come around mid-June. It's basically just another fail-safe in the system. It basically is saying, PSEG is saying, hey, Direct Energy just contacted us and told us that starting in July, they're going to be your supplier. We just want to make sure that's what you want. And if it's not, just call us and we will basically cancel the enrollment. So that's one more bite at the apple that PSEG gives you. And again, even after the initial enrollment and you start with the program and you get your first charges from Direct Energy in August, the August bill, you can still get out anytime after that you want. You just contact either Direct Energy, PSEG, or Gable Associates, and we'll get you out of the program again. There's no penalty, no fees at any time. So you can get out in month 1 through month 17 anytime. Okay, I mentioned there's a couple of small groups of customers who were not included in the initial eligibility pool and would not have received a mailing. That includes folks that already have their own current third-party supply contract. They are pulled out, and that's by state rule. It does not allow us to include people who already have a contract, which makes sense because you already have your own contract. We don't know when it is, what the price is. You've gotten that on your own, so you are not included initially. Those folks can still opt into the program if they want. The other category of folks that were initially excluded were folks with existing solar panel systems, and I know there's folks out there with a system, but we'll answer your questions. But the concept is basically if you have solar on the roof, the vast majority of those systems rely on something called a net meter, which basically measures how much you produce. And in times when your solar produces more than you're using, it goes back to the grid. But you get credit for that on your PSEG bill, which you can carry over and credit against future months. So you get full retail credit for that excess production. Other than PSEG, the regular third-party suppliers are not equipped and not able to provide that same net metering. They don't have the wherewithal to provide that. So if you've got a solar system that's relying on banking and net metering, you really are better off with staying with PSEG. So we pull you out. Again, those folks are welcome to opt in, but we always urge people with solar, you can opt in, but you should make sure first that you're not relying on net metering. There's a small number of systems that are smaller in size that they don't actually overproduce. Usually in the summer months is when you get your maximum production. And so those folks, if you don't rely on that, you can certainly come into the program, but make sure first. I'm just going to touch, just leave it there just fine, but on third-party supply folks, again, folks that have third-party supply that were not included in the initial pool did not get the mailing. They are also welcome to opt in, but we always advise those folks that please first read the deal that you've gotten to, again, compare the price to what this program price is, if there's renewable energy content, other things, and then most importantly, review the deal you have to make sure that if you leave it to join the program, you're not going to hit it with any penalties. If all that's square and there's no repercussions, then by all means, if you think this is a better deal, then cancel your current deal and come to join this program. Perfectly fine. So the basic timeline again, the contract was awarded back in April. The packages were mailed out May 1st. Here we are tonight on May 9th at the public information session. The opt-out period ends on May 30th. The enrollment then would take place for those folks who don't opt out. You'd receive a second notification from PSEG around mid-June, notifying you that your account has been enrolled. And then service commences in July in your meter read date, whenever that occurs in July. And then service ends in December 2020 for those folks who stay in the whole time. Again, you can get it at any time along the way, but that's the length of the contract. So a quick recap. Everyone in town, residential accounts are included initially, except those folks with solar or those folks that have third-party supply contracts, and subject to the open-ended ability to opt out. The program has about 41% renewable energy content, which is roughly double the PSEG current supply content. And the price is more than 10% below the currently prevailing PSEG price. Even with some anticipated reductions in PSEG's price later this year and their typical fluctuations due to something called a reconciliation factor, we're still projecting about $150 in savings over the whole 17 months for the typical customer compared to the average PSEG tariff price for power over that same period. Folks can opt out anytime they want. The contract price is what we call non-variable. That means it basically does not change. You go to the next slide, Jess. The only reason it could change is if there's some kind of a change in law at the state or federal level that increases the cost for our supplier and also impacts the PSEG cost by the same amount. So if there's a change in law that, say, increases PSEG's price by 2%, and it also affects direct energy's cost by 2%, they would be, after review by us and by the towns, they can increase the price by just the 2% just to match the PSEG change. That's as far as they can go. Only if there's a change in law that affects their cost that also affects PSEG by the same amount, so that there's no change in the savings. Very importantly, again, to reiterate, your relationship with PSEG does not change at all. PSEG is still the delivery system, delivery power provider. They are answerable to the Board of Public Utilities to provide a reliable service. If the lights go out, you still call PSEG, same phone number, nothing changes there. You still receive one bill from PSEG. The only difference is there'll be just a new line item on the bill for direct energy charges to replace PSEG's power supply charges. Residents who have budget billing will still get budget billing. Direct Energy has been instructed as to who has budget billing with PSEG, and they're obligated to set up a budget plan for you as well for their piece of the bill. So they would set up a budget amount for your power supply charges, and PSEG would still give you a budget amount for delivery charges. Because this price is lower than what the PSEG price has been, the total budget amount should go down. Unless you have been behind on your PSEG budget amount, but apples to apples, because the total price is going down, your budget amount would go down. No change if you happen to be receiving financial assistance on your PSEG bill through either the LIHEAP is called low income heating energy assistance program, or universal service program. You still get that because you're still getting a PSEG bill. Those are state funded programs administered through the PSEG bill. So you're still getting a PSEG bill, so you'd still receive that financial assistance. And if some of you have a worry-free appliance repair contract, again, your relationship with PSEG doesn't change. You'll still see those charges on your bill for the repair contract, and you still call PSEG if your hot water heater is on the fritz or your furnace, etc. So reading your PSEG bill. So your PSEG bill is basically split into two different portions, delivery and supply. The direct energy charges, if you're in this program, will just simply replace the supply charges on the PSEG bill. And I'll show you an example of this. This is a little bit in the weeds here, but if for some reason you need to contact PSEG or Direct Energy or us about your account, if you want to opt in or you want to opt out or whatever the case may be, the key number is your pod. It's called a pod ID number. It's a 20-digit number on your account bill, and I'll show it on the next slide. Let's just go to that, Jess. So this is basically what a PSEG bill looks like. You can see the top half is delivery charges, bottom half is supply charges. The delivery charges will stay exactly the same. PSEG is still a delivery company. The bottom supply charges, those will be replaced by the direct energy supply charges. And then I mentioned that pod ID number in the right side of the bill in that square called price to compare. Your pod ID number, that's where it is. It's a 20-digit number starting with PE and then a bunch of digits. That's the number that we need to reference to look up your account. So that concludes the babbling part of the show. So now we're going to open it up to questions. Gray, you're working the mic? Yeah. Gray's going to walk around and take questions on the mobile mic, and I'm going to ask my colleague Jesse, who is the main person who, if you call us, he's the main person who's going to be talking to you about your questions. So I'm going to defer to Jesse to answer your questions, and I'll jump in if need be.
Let Bob save his instrument for the member municipalities, I guess. Yes, please.
If you see today the bill, there are different price for different charges.
Mm-hmm.
How does it work for the new bill? Like just one fixed price?
Yeah. Yes, exactly. So the way that Direct Energy's charges are going to appear, there isn't going to be any kind of tiers per se. The only charges that you're going to see, like the dollar amount, is going to be calculable by your total usage multiplied times the contract price, which is 11.005 cents. There's no on peak or off peak charges. There's no block charges based on how much you use.
Right, so you've got, you're right, there's typically like 4 lines. So there's typically 4 lines on the PSEG bill for supply. Very confusing, right? So a couple reasons for that. One is that at least in the summer months, PSEG has one price for the first 600 kilowatt hours and then a higher price for usage over 600 kilowatt hours. So there's 2 tiers of pricing. And then their price varies somewhat every month. So and that's calendar month. So most people are on a billing cycle that runs from, let's say, May 8th to June 7th or something. You're spanning 2 calendar months. So they're showing you the price for it's prorated over the 2 months. So if the price, was say 12.5 cents for the calendar month of May, and then maybe 13 cents for July, June, sorry, jumping ahead. They're showing you sort of a prorated. So here's how much usage in May, and this is the price for that, for the first kilowatt hours, the second. Now the rest is for the usage in the next calendar month. So it gets very confusing. This program, it's one price, it's 0.11005 per kilowatt hour for every kilowatt hour, every month, no matter. It's much simpler.
Yes. Okay. Our family had been part of the community energy program, which public service, I guess, canceled, which is had been a little more expensive. And so we then went out and looked around and signed up with Verde Energy. I guess my question's two parts. First, you mentioned that folks who were in a third party shouldn't have gotten the letter.
That is correct. Residents who are shopping on their own are typically are excluded from the program because they've already entered into a contract with a third-party supplier. The main reason why, or one of the main reasons why this legislation was passed back in 2003 was to encourage and foster more participation in the third-party supply market. So we wouldn't want, so if you've already got out and shopped, that objective is fulfilled. But also, those termination fees. Some residents are in contracts where there's termination fees, so we wouldn't want to interfere with that contract and force you to incur one of those.
My question was, I had signed up, I think, back in maybe at the beginning of April. I'm expecting that this month is the first month with Verde, but I did get a letter. So do I still need to do something to opt out, or?
So yeah, I would. So let me take your information down.
Okay.
I'd be more than happy to chat with you afterwards, and I'll make sure that we have your information so that we can remove you from our system. Because
Thank
if
you.
you got the letter, you're likely going to be enrolled.
Basically, it's probably just kind of crossed, we didn't receive the list.
So the reason why that happened is we got our information from PSEG nearly immediately after that contract was awarded on April 2nd. So the list that PSEG gave to us, there may have very well been a lag in how they registered you as a third-party supply customer and the production of their data that eventually got to us. So that's a unfortunate misstep, but we'll make sure. Yeah.
If you want to stay with the Verde contract, just let us know, and then, so here's the deal, basically, is if you want to stay with the Verde contract, then just let us know, and we'll opt you out of this, so it stays with Verde. If you think this is a better deal, then you don't have to do anything, and Direct Energy will enroll you. That will cancel out the Verde relationship, but I don't know what your Verde relationship says about fees or anything, so I would check that. But
the Verde was a 24-month, which they said was 100% renewable, and it was fixed at 12 cents for the 24 months. No cancellation fee.
Okay.
Which I sort of, it was slightly more expensive than this, and it was also a $100 rebate. And so,
I think, yeah, usually those deals at the $100 rebate, I think you have to stay for a certain period of time before you get it, or something like that, right? But so, yeah, but if you want to stay with that deal, which you're certainly welcome to, just give us your information and we'll make sure you're out of this.
the Verde, one of the companies that you folks,
Verde was not. Verde. Yeah, they were active in the GEA market at one point, and I think actually we did do a program with them in the early days of New Jersey GEA, but I think they're not really active in the market anymore.
A few questions, actually. So I'm sort of in the same boat. I signed up a year and a half ago with Inspire. Their price was similar-ish to PSEG, but I like the fact that they were like 100%. I think their solar went something, 100% green, they said. First year was fine. After the first year, I noticed a little bit of a subtle bait and switch that if you have a contract with them, you can get a good price, but if you just ignore it, they go to a month by month, then it jumped up quite a bit.
Right, it floated to a market rate, so
Yeah.
That's
So I signed up for a contract with them back in October. I also got a letter, so it looks like you may have something going on because I'm not in the month kind of thing that this guy was. I mean, I've been with them supposedly I signed a contract with them back in October, so.
Sure. So I'll be happy to talk with you afterwards. And if I can take a look at your bill, I'd be that would probably shed some light on what exactly is going on here.
Okay, didn't bring my bill with me, so.
Well, or I can get if I can get in touch. We can get in touch
absolutely.
afterwards, and we are always available at our 855 number.
Okay. Compared to Inspire, I like them because allegedly they're like 100% green. And I'd be happy to pay a little bit more. I don't know about everybody else in town, but I'd be happy to pay a little bit more with a higher renewable content. Is that an option going forward? Is that something that was looked at, or?
That's actually probably a good question for a great answer, because that was hotly, it was debated and discussed among the group, and they landed on this product for a specific reason, so I think Gray maybe you discuss that.
Well, yeah, and that's a really good point, and there's many other residents who said they would like to have more renewable energy. So when we went to get these prices, and we asked the suppliers to bid on providing us with this 40% Class 1 PJM generated renewable energy. So again, not all renewable energy RECs are the same, because you can be benefiting from getting RECs that are from out of state or from far away. For instance, we kind of characterize them as Texas wind RECs, which are very inexpensive, and some would say it doesn't really benefit. It's not an investment in the New Jersey region for renewable energy. That's what we insisted on. Class 1 is a definition of the Board of Public Utilities that is specifically solar, wind, landfill captured renewable energy, and low impact hydro. But we also insisted that they were PJM. For our 40%, they are PJM, so that we're investing now in renewable energy generation in the New Jersey region, not just New Jersey, but in our area. What's that? PJM is our regional grid, which includes New Jersey, New York, Pennsylvania, Maryland, New York, right? Maryland, and then a little bit farther west and a little bit farther south, but it's basically our portion of the national grid is called PJM. It's actually got its initials from Pennsylvania, New Jersey, and Maryland, PJM, but it is a little bit broader than that. But we felt strongly that we wanted to be investing in renewable energy in our region to see it grow. And we also felt that you don't receive this, that it's not that much of a attribute or a benefit to pay for low-cost wind generated in Texas. It doesn't help New Jersey, and it doesn't help us. I would also say that we could have said we're going to do the 40% Class 1 renewable RECs for this project, and then also decided to buy at a much lower cost with a little bit more money the rest of the energy, to be able to say that we're 100% renewable energy by buying these low cost and lower value Texas wind RECs. But we didn't. Instead, and this is important, we're very proud of this, we want everybody to know, we're taking that little extra piece that's included already in the price that you'll pay. We are going to enable, in addition to your 40% renewable energy that you're now acquiring, we're also going to be able to, the Direct Energy will fund a promotional campaign for all Montclair residents in all 5 towns to tie people into energy efficiency programs that are available from the Board of Public Utilities Office of Clean Energy, that are already available but people don't know about and don't take advantage, in particular for low-income residents that are low-income qualified. There are programs like Comfort Partners that can help people do weatherization in their homes, insulate their homes, make sure that their homes are healthier and using less energy and saving them more money. They'll save much more money than the $150 average that they may save over the course of the 17 months. And we think this is a terrific, better benefit. And we haven't mentioned it so far tonight because it's going to roll out over the course of the next 17 months as we start. So that's why. And I appreciate your input that you would pay more for more renewable energy, and maybe next time, maybe we will look to see if we can get bidders to suppliers to bid the higher content of Class 1 renewable energy for the Sustainable Essex Alliance. Does that answer that question? Did you have another one?
Yeah, 2 more questions. One,
So when this contract is over, do we go through the same process? Mailing goes out, it'll tell us everything, there'll be a meeting, or is it just sort of
So basically, when the contract ends, one of a couple of things will happen. About midway through the contract, the partners in the Sustainable Essex Alliance, they're going to take a look at what the market looks like, and they are going to have to put out another RFP onto the street to get an entirely new round of bidders to come and submit their price proposals, and that's going to be evaluated against forward-looking market conditions. And if warranted, the Sustainable Essex Alliance will award a contract. And if that were the case, there's going to be a whole nother round of opt-outs. Letters will go out, opt-out cards will go out, residents will be informed of the new contract price, what have you, parallel to the process that's currently ongoing, and that would pick up right after, and that would pick up after the end of this contract. Residents would be if residents who want to participate would be without any input moved from the current supplier to whoever wins the next round. If not, what will happen? Residents will be returned to PSEG as the default supplier, without any input of their own, by the current supplier, and residents will go back onto the BGS.
And just one last thing, you had a slide up there earlier, it had contact information.
Yeah, sure.
This program summary, the contact info looks different, so maybe there's two sets of contact info, but
Yeah,
there are
so one
discrepancies
set
there.
of contact info is for Gable Associates, and the other set of contact info is for Direct Energy. Direct Energy is the current program supplier, and we are the municipal energy agent for Montclair. And either source can be reached for assistance.
There's no time of use program, is there?
No, there's no.
I can never find a third-party supplier that offers time of use, and PSEG's is so bad it's almost a joke.
Right. So
They charge so much more for the regular.
So time of use customers, folks who are under the RLM, residential load management rate class, are included under this contract. When we got our prices in from the bidders, we took a look at the average price to compare for a typical residential load management customer, and we did find that in fact that the average customer under this rate class did stand to benefit. So those customers are being included under the current contract. And yeah, I'll certainly get to that. But so residential load management customers are included, but that on-peak, off-peak usage is only going to apply to your delivery charges. Supply charges are going to be charged exactly the same as a customer who is enrolled under the contract under a standard residential service rate class. So it's just you would just pay your kilowatt hour usage times the contract price of 11.005 cents per kilowatt hour. The only thing that I would say about residential load management customers who want to take a further look at their potential savings is if you have an electric vehicle, or you for some reason or another are a heavy off-peak user. If you're using energy between 9 p.m. and 5 a.m. and mostly on weekends, those customers the typical customer who would use energy under that scenario would be someone who does own an electric vehicle. Yeah, you would. Some of those customers tend to have a relatively low price to compare because they're using the vast majority of their usage during those off-peak hours, which is very atypical. The way that PSEG has that residential load load management tariff set up is designed in such a way that the typical residential load management customer doesn't really stand to save that much money versus the typical residential service tariff
The
customer.
regular rate is so high that you don't come out ahead.
Right, yeah, it's something like 15, 16 cents per kilowatt hour versus the 18 cents per kilowatt hour, I think, is one time I checked
It has
recently.
one of the worst ones if you compare different people in different states in the electric car community, and they have it like after midnight it's practically free, or it's 2 cents a kilowatt, because they're balancing their grid in different places.
Right, so that's
So this
yeah.
doesn't address that either.
And then certainly that's something that's cooking at PSEG and at the BPU right now. Some kind of tariff that would accommodate folks who are electric car chargers, but it's still a ways away. So that's
There are people who've actually they had a time of use in a different state. I just know from the electric car community, and they found their electric bill actually went down when they got an electric car, because they had a time of use, and they arranged for their washer dryers and things like that to also go on at like midnight or 1 in the morning, and so the bill ended up going down.
Yeah, that's definitely a possibility, but yeah, the contract price is just pretty plain vanilla.
You also get more conscious of what you're using, which most people don't think about in America.
So listening to the presentation and doing research and everything, it's a win-win, I think. I mean, you're getting more for less. I don't understand. I mean, in the past, I've looked into this myself, and my apprehension was, bait and switch, and I didn't have any protection. You got the whole town. You got 5 towns protecting you, and you guys doing all the research. What could be some of the negatives? Why would people opt out, that didn't have already contracts or solar? What would...
So we hate to toot our own horn here, but yeah, really we really see very little downside with these programs because unlike a typical residential supply contract for supply between a resident and one of these suppliers, this is you have the municipality buying in bulk on behalf of residents. You have the protections afforded by a contract which has been thoroughly vetted by the BPU, by the rate council, by the township's attorneys. The only thing that I would say is, just keep, sometimes a budget billing customers can sometimes the only thing budget billing customers, they are given an equal payment plan by the supplier automatically, but on the accounting on the PSEG bill, it will not display your balance one way or the other with the current third-party supplier. So the budget billing, your current balance that's shown on the PSEG bill is only for the portion of your bill that's with PSEG as it currently stands in New Jersey, and with the PSEG, JCP&L, there's no mechanism to accommodate what your current balance is one way or the other with the if you have a third-party supplier. But that's really that's really the only
Jump in a little bit. I don't know if you understand what Jesse's saying with the balance. It basically means you have a flat amount every month that you pay, but the actual amount of charges you're accruing is your actual usage that month times the actual price. So if in a month where you're using a lot, let's say in July, more than the average, in that month you're going to pay less under budget than you actually used. So that'll a growing debit, so to speak, or credit will show, on the how much you owe, and that should clear up over time. But sometimes if you use a lot different amount of energy than you did the year before, which is the basis for the budget amount, sometimes it can get out of whack, and there's no way that PSEG, they won't put the supplier's amount of the budget deficit, or so to speak, on the bill, so you're not aware of it. So one of the things we've done, as we've kind of become more aware of this over the years, is we've gotten more proactive with suppliers to regularly check the budget billing amounts, provide us a file, and if folks are getting out of whack and using technical terms, we have the supplier readjust the budget amount to get them back into balance. So we have to take a little more proactive role on that. On your question about why would some people want to opt out if there's no downside, I mean, honestly, some folks just feel that they don't want the town making that decision for them. It's just sort of a philosophical thing. What I try to explain to folks like that is I don't think they fully appreciate it. I try to hit on it earlier. Essentially now, if you were with PSEG, you're essentially, that decision's being made for you. PSEG is only a wires company. They buy power supply under state edict, under state rules, and that's what you get if you don't do anything unless you opt out. So really, it's already happening to you. You just don't realize it. My feeling is, I might rather have my town, who's closer to my heartbeat, so to speak, buying on my behalf rather than the state. So that's, I think sometimes if folks just don't maybe fully appreciate what is going on now and how it compares to this, but sometimes you run into that, and that's fine. If folks are just not comfortable with it, they can opt out.
One little quick thing I wanted, just a quick one. So the contracted price, just so I understand, the contracted price is good for the 5 municipalities, right? It's
That
not
is
one
correct. There
particular
is,
one for- okay.
it is a,
That's what I thought.
yeah.
Yeah, to your point. Just to your point about, I mean, one of the things that kept me from doing something was I figured public service, it's the big established company, supply and demand, they'll always have enough electricity to, meet the demand. And I was always leery of these other companies, what happens if there's not enough supply for the demand? And actually what you're saying is public service is in the same boat as all these companies. They're all buying in the open market.
It's hard to talk about this without getting into the weeds.
Yeah, it gets a little bit into the weeds, but PSEG, but the way that the contract price is secured is basically the supplier on the day of the price proposals, April 2nd, 2019, Direct Energy. They went out onto the market and they managed to procure traded in the electricity market for a quantity of power that they would supply into the PJM grid over the course of the 17 months between July of 2019 and December of 2020. Effectively, they went out and they bought a futures contract that obligates them to pay a certain amount into the grid. There's no physical interaction happening between Direct Energy and the PJM grid itself. Yeah.
I guess really to understand what Jesse's saying, a little quicker about the grid, the PJM grid. So it's a regional grid. Every power generator, and as I said, they're owned by hundreds of entities. That's part of deregulation, and they are all overseen by this grid operator. So the grid operator is operating daily markets, they're basically directing the utilities, how to flip switches on the transmission system. They are running a daily market where they basically set a schedule for which generator turns on next. They make sure there are reserves in place. So independent power, some producers are just running what we call spinning reserve. They're firing, they're spinning, but they're not engaging the turbine to produce electricity. But if one power generator trips, the PJM grid will instantaneously sense that and direct that spinning turbine to engage, boom, produce electricity. So basically the point Jesse's making is there's a difference between the physical market and the financial market. The physical market is separate. The PJM grid is orchestrating this very complex grid, communicating instantaneously with hundreds of power generators of all different owners, and making sure that there's always enough power there in the short term. And they also run a planning process, and they run a capacity market, which is run 3 years in advance to make sure long term there's enough capacity. So that's the grid. The grid operator's operation is reliability at the high level. And then individual suppliers are basically trading in that marketplace and getting futures or getting hedge contracts, and that they're securing that price. But there's no, when you go from PSEG to another supplier, back to PSEG another, the grid doesn't change at all. The electrons don't change. So that's really a distinction between those two things. Correct. I mean, they do have a deregulated side of the business which owns some power plants, but they're not, when PSEG goes out to bid for their annual wholesale supply, PSEG's unregulated arm power generator is just one of many bidders bidding into the marketplace, and they sometimes win a portion of the load, but not all of the load, so they're just like any other supplier, basically. Yeah.
First of all, thank you for bringing this to us. For the first time, I feel like I'm getting some real information. Two questions. One is regarding that example you provided about the typical saving, and what would that assume in terms of the typical monthly bill for that consumer? Is there a chart for that or something? Like how much is he consuming in terms of the kilowatt hours over the 17-month period to get a...
Yeah, so based on the typical load profile for a resident in a sustainable Essex municipality, I think that roughly off the top of my head, that assumes an average usage of about $800, $900 per month, but it gets a little bit, 800 kilowatt hours per month, excuse me, but
ready to jump
but it gets a little tricky because PSEG, they have summer and winter rates as well.
Right.
So residents who run up larger chart have a lot of air conditioning usage in the summertime may very well have a much higher price to compare than the typical resident per se.
Okay.
And
yeah.
we take the monthly aggregate usage for town
Mm-hmm.
and number of customers, and that we develop a typical monthly profile. But as Jesse said, I think the number does come out to somewhere around 800, 900 kilowatt hours a month, something like that.
Okay. So, and you're just looking at the consumption part of the electricity.
So yeah, we are not looking
not
at the
the-
delivery portion
Not
of the
delivery
electricity.
portion. And one last question. Any nuances between a homeowner versus a apartment dweller?
So the only thing I would say is that folks who are in apartments they will be included on the program if they are individually metered and get their own bill from PSEG. There's some folks who simply pay their monthly bill to their co-op board or their homeowners association, which takes service takes service for the entire building, probably under a commercial tariff, so they wouldn't be included under the program. Sometimes there is like an arbitrary distinction between which apartment buildings have individual meters and like which don't. So in my experience, not necessarily all apartment dwellers will have been included on the initial enrollment list and have gotten the letter and are going to be eligible for the contract price. So that's what I'd say. If you want to be a part of the program, I'd say either call up Direct Energy or call up Gable Associates to ensure that you're on the enrollment list.
I did get the letter.
Then you would be in, and there would be no distinction between you and any other resident under this program.
And one last question, which is, what's your estimation of how rapidly this is going to evolve this industry from the perspective of the end customer?
So in terms of the way that like the renewables are procured, or the way that residents are going to be engaged in the process.
It's sort of like how when you were shopping for data from the data providers like Verizon, you got Fios, and over the years it's gone from like 2400K to like a jillion gigabits per second. Mm-hmm. So are we looking at that kind of evolution in this industry, meaning Is this something I need to keep up with all the time?
Our role as an energy consultant is to try and do the thinking for the municipalities. But I will say that over time, there may be depending on changes in the renewable portfolio standard, changes in the structure of the residential service or residential time of day supply tariff is going to affect the costs of doing business in the PJM grid one way or another. So the kinds of prices that suppliers are able to offer a contract rate for may change, but that's I would say like energy market arcana that's a little in the weeds. But I will say that typically when municipalities go out to shop on behalf or go out for a contract on behalf of the residents, they do make an assessment. They're going to be making a reappraised assessment of what those contract prices that they get from the suppliers look like versus the currently prevailing and future predicted utility tariff prices, and weigh that against the benefits provided by the renewable contents.
So first, I'd like to also say thank you so much. I'm really excited that our town is getting this benefit, and I'm incredibly impressed with how thorough this whole process has been. I have two questions. One, right now I already have a third-party service. That service is I think it's about to renew, so I'm going to call and find out if I can cancel that. There's nothing for me to do after that point, so once I cancel my third-party service, and I apologize if you covered this already, I missed the...
This is not easy stuff.
Yeah, so if you are currently on a third-party supplier and you did not get the letter, then you are most likely not going to be automatically opted into the program. You would have to take the affirmative step of opting into the program. All you would need to do is simply provide us with your name, address, and your PODID number, that 20 character number beginning with our code beginning with P and E, followed by the 18 digits. Only thing I would say is make sure you check with your current third-party supplier to make sure there's no opt-out or termination fees with them, so that you don't incur any kind of surprise charges.
Right. And then my other question, again, and this is purely curiosity, and again, you may have covered it, but what is the mix that Direct Energy is providing, like solar versus wind, et cetera?
So the mix is about it's it's going to be it's about 5% in-state New Jersey solar recs, which are largely part of the New Jersey Renewable Portfolio Standard mandate. And about 36% of that, is going to be wind. The wind tends to be one of the cheaper resources that fulfills that PJM Class 1 requirement.
Okay, great. Thank you.
You seem to have answered most of my questions, but my mom had a third-party service. And what happened when I was checking her bills, because I do her bills, I was just happened to look at it one time, and it had skyrocketed. So I canceled that. Now, in canceling it, it took 3 months to cancel. And the third-party source told me that. I didn't believe them. So I checked with PSEG, and they said, yes, it has something to do with their billing cycle. And it takes 3 months for it to happen. So I am wondering, do you have some special deal with them when I cancel? Because you said I could cancel at any time once the program starts. Can I do that? And is it not going to take 3 months?
Sure. So I can answer that. So good news in recent years, there has been a shortening of the duration shortening of the duration of time in which one has to submit an enrollment or unenrollment request with PSEG in order to see that change reflected on the bill, reflected with your next
like
billing
about
period.
3 months ago, so I don't know.
So, yeah, the only way the supply changes, it can only take place on a meter read date. That's just the way the system is automated by PSEG, so that's a fact.
Yeah.
So, as Jesse alluded to, the time period used to be a minimum of 20 days before the next meter read. The PSEG needed that much minimum time to process it. So basically the switching time was anywhere from 20 days to about 50 days, depending on where you were in the meter read cycle. If you just missed.
Yeah, I got that impression.
But that's the max. So now the time period, as Jesse alluded to, has gone down to 13 days. So now it's anywhere from 13 days to about 43 days. That's it. If it's longer, and that's the same, we have the same thing. You can opt out immediately, but it does take effect on your next available meter read date. So it's not overnight, but it's as soon as possible. But what I suspect may not be a strong enough word. What typically went on, I think, is once a typical third-party supplier, once you call them, say you want out, it may take, a little while to push the button. I mean, it's basically, once it gets automated and the switch request goes into PSEG, it will be anywhere from the 20 to 40, the 13 to 43 days, depending on where you are. There can be no alteration to that because the entire thing is through electronic data interface. It's automated. Yeah. So any longer than that, it's because the supplier set on it. That simple. And that's one of the things. Our supplier is obligated to expeditiously process and do it right away. They have a contract with the town. So it's not literally overnight. It is within that normal cycle. That's as fast as it can go. But it should not be, at worst, it should be about 5 weeks at worst, and as short as maybe 2 weeks. Any longer, if your supplier just sat on it, plain and simple. If it took 3 months, they sat on it.
Well, I can't remember how quickly it took, but they told me about the meter read and all that, and no, they didn't sit on it because I followed up to make sure they had the paperwork. I followed up with PSEG to make sure they got it. I mean, I know they didn't sit on it because I was. It doesn't.
If it took 3 months, they didn't submit it electronically to PSEG right away. They may have processed it in their system, but once they push the button with PSEG, it rolls automatically, and it will catch the next available meter reads subject to that protocol of it's got to be at least 13 days ahead. And
maybe I had the 3 months wrong. Maybe it was like 2 months. But it wasn't immediate.
It should be no more than about 5 weeks. That's about 5 to 6 weeks is about the longest.
And yes, similar to this. So similar to the letter that's going to be generated from PSEG to residents who choose to remain in the program, PSEG in this case, if you are submitting an unenrollment request, should kick back to you within a week and a half, 2 weeks of your opt-out request, some kind of letter confirming to you that you have made this decision, elected to make this decision to remove yourself from the supplier. So if you hadn't received any kind of notice within the 1 to 2 weeks of making those phone calls, then someone was probably sitting on it.
Yeah. But this is a question for you. Why did the township decide to, I assume because to get the best deal you need the most numbers, why did they decide to put everybody in, and you had to request to opt out versus, another way?
So the reason why this is an opt out program versus
You don't work for the town, right?
no.
Yeah, that's why I asked him.
Oh, excuse me.
Right. So, we covered that. The reason he started to answer is because we covered that, and that is where that is how the state regulations work. That is how a government energy aggregation program is designed, and you can understand the reasoning behind it is you could give away a free bag of groceries to folks and send a mailer to everybody saying you've got a $100 certificate in here, and you would get about 3 or 4% of the public responding and saying, I want to take advantage of this. Because that's just the nature of registration, is that people are hesitant to do it, and they don't think about it, they don't do it. Also, the suppliers who are bidding, they need to see the maximum number of kilowatt hours that they're bidding on, without gambling that, well, maybe we could get 10% of Montclair residents to join, or 12%. When everybody's in, then they can offer this simple method that if you don't want cleaner, healthier, greener energy, and you don't want to save money, if you want dirtier energy and you want to pay more, you can do it. All you have to do is do a simple either, send the card or press a button or make a phone call. But everybody else can benefit by being enrolled automatically. That's why, to make it easier for everybody to save money with an improved product, with greener, cleaner energy. Does that answer your question? Yeah. Good. Anybody else with questions? I thank you all, folks, for coming tonight, and as a reminder, that's for Gable Associates, who really have the answers. You should also, really, we got to also thank our council, the Township Council, because they enabled this to happen. All 5 councils of the 5 respective towns all enabled the Sustainable Essex Alliance to make this improvement for their residents. So if you get a chance, tell your council member that you think it's a good idea. And finally, all this information is all on the township's website. So if you think of something in the middle of the night the way I do, it'll be available to you. It's on the town website at www.montclairnjusa.org at all times. And also, you've got phone numbers in those mailers, both from Gable. You've got my number here in Town Hall. I'm Gray Russell. You've got PSEG's phone number and Direct Energy's number, and you can always ask questions in the future. Thank you very, very much, ladies and gentlemen, and congratulations.